The drive to Harmony Creek felt like hitting a reset button I desperately needed. Leaving the city with its screaming sirens and my own screaming failures was the only choice I had left. The town's hospital was small, a two-story brick building that looked more like a well-kept school than a medical facility. People said Dr. Arthur Anderson, the man in charge, was some kind of miracle worker, a genius who'd left the big leagues for a quiet life. Sounded good to me. Quiet was exactly what I was looking for. My first shift was a blur of new faces and procedures, all of them smiling and efficient. Everything ran like a well-oiled machine. Dr. Anderson was as advertised, charming, brilliant, with a way of explaining complex procedures that made you feel like you were the smart one. He had this warm, reassuring smile that could probably calm a rabid dog. The staff worshipped him. The patients looked at him like he was the second coming. It was on my first rounds that I saw it, a little crack in the polished surface. Mr. Miller, room 204. He'd just had a brain tumor removed 2 days ago, a procedure Anderson performed himself. The chart said he was recovering at an impossible rate. I pushed the door open to check his vitals. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, ramrod straight, staring at the blank white wall across from him. He wasn't looking at anything in particular, just staring. His chest rose and fell in a slow, even rhythm. Up and down, up and down. It was so steady, it reminded me of one of those breathing machines in the ICU. "Mr. Miller," I said, keeping my voice gentle, "how are you feeling this evening?" He didn't answer, didn't even blink. His eyes stayed fixed on the wall. "Sir?" Nothing. I stepped closer, waving a hand in front of his face. Not a flicker. I checked his pulse. Strong and steady. Too steady. It was like feeling the pulse of a clock. I shrugged it off. "He's probably still out of it," I mumbled to myself. "Anesthesia can do weird things to people." I marked his chart and moved on. Later that night, the real quiet settled in. The kind of deep night hush where the squeak of your own shoes on the linoleum sounds like a gunshot. I was walking past the post-op recovery ward, a 3-bed room for Anderson's special cases. As I got closer, I felt something more than I heard it, a low thrumming, a vibration that seemed to crawl up from the floor, through the soles of my shoes and into my bones. It wasn't the hum of the refrigerators from the canteen or the buzz of the overhead lights. This was different. It was organic. I peeked through the small glass window in the door. 3 patients, all sleeping, all on their backs, and all 3 of their chests were rising and falling at the exact same time. It was an unnerving ballet of breath, perfectly synchronized. The low thrumming sound was them. It was the sound of their 3 bodies breathing as one. My own heart gave a stupid little flutter, a panicked bird trying to break out of its cage. And for a terrifying second, it felt like it was trying to match their rhythm. What the hell? I shook my head, rubbing my eyes. "Just a coincidence," I whispered. "A really, really weird coincidence." I forced myself to walk away, the low hum seeming to follow me down the hall. The next day, I met Eleanor. She was in room 301, with a fractured pelvis, a sweet old lady with eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. She spent the morning telling me all about her grandkids and the prize-winning roses she grew in her backyard. Her voice was like warm honey. She was a splash of life in this overly tidy place. That afternoon, Dr. Anderson stopped by on his rounds. "Good news, Eleanor," he said, that winning smile firmly in place. "We're going to perform a small procedure this afternoon. Just a little something to accelerate the bone cohesion. You'll be back in that garden before you know it." She beamed at him. I felt a knot form in my stomach, but I couldn't say why. I went to check on her after my dinner break. The knot in my stomach was now a cold, heavy stone. Eleanor was sitting up in bed, just like Mr. Miller had been. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap. Her back was perfectly straight. The crinkles around her eyes were gone, smoothed out into a placid, unreadable mask. "Mrs. Eleanor," I said, my voice a little shaky, "how are you feeling? Your grandkids must be missing you something fierce." She turned her head to look at me. The movement was smooth, without a single wasted motion. Her voice, when it came, was flat, monotone. The warm honey was gone, replaced by something sterile and metallic. The emotional state of my family members is not relevant to my current physiological condition. I just stood there, my mouth hanging open. The words didn't compute. Oh, right. What about your roses? I bet they're blooming beautifully this time of year. Botanical data is outside the required parameters for my recovery, she said. Then she turned her head back to the front, resuming her stare at the wall. I backed out of the room. My hand was pressed against my chest, trying to keep my heart from pounding its way out. That wasn't Eleanor. That was a shell, a walking, breathing anatomy doll. The cold stone in my stomach shattered, sending icy splinters through my veins. He hadn't cured her. He'd deleted her. Everything that made her Eleanor, her laugh, her memories of her grandkids, her love for her stupid roses, he had just wiped it all away. He killed her without ever stopping her heart. This wasn't a hospital. It was an abattoir for the soul. My shift finally ended. I felt drained, like I'd run a marathon in my head. I stumbled out into the main corridor, my only thought to get to my car and drive anywhere. And he was there, Dr. Anderson, standing at the nurse's station, looking over a chart. He looked up as I approached, and that warm, caring smile spread across his face. It made me want to vomit. "You look tired, Nurse Jenkins," he said, his voice full of concern. "The well-being of our staff is a top priority here, you know." The moment the words left his mouth, it happened. Down the hall, Mr. Miller stepped out of his room. From the recovery ward, the 3 post-op patients emerged. From room 301, Eleanor stood in her doorway. In one fluid, silent, and perfectly coordinated motion, all 5 of them turned their heads and looked directly at me. They just stared, their faces blank, their eyes seeing nothing and everything. And in the sudden, crushing quiet of the hallway, I could hear it again, faint but growing stronger, that low, insistent hum, the sound of a machine made of flesh. My feet were glued to the floor. 5 pairs of eyes, all identical in their emptiness, were locked onto me. Anderson just kept smiling, that calm, fatherly smile, as if he'd just complimented me on my shoes and not sicked his human puppets on me. The hum was louder now, a low thrum that vibrated in my teeth. It felt like standing too close to a giant power line. My training, my instincts, every fiber of my being screamed one word: run. I didn't say a word to Anderson. I just turned, my movements stiff and clumsy, and walked away. I didn't run. Running would be admitting something was wrong. Running would be panic, and I had a sick feeling that panic was exactly what they wanted. I walked, focusing on the squeak of my own shoes on the linoleum, trying to drown out the hum that followed me like a shadow. I could feel their eyes on my back the entire way down the hall. I didn't dare look back. The staff break room felt like the only safe place in the world. I fumbled with the handle, pushed the door open, and slammed it shut behind me, leaning against it as my lungs finally remembered how to work. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Okay, Sarah, breathe. Just breathe. It's not real. You're overworked, you're stressed, you're in a new place. Your mind is playing tricks on you." I needed to hear a familiar voice, a sane voice. I lurched over to the old wall-mounted phone and snatched the receiver. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to use my index finger to poke at the numbers, dialing my sister's cell. I pressed the phone so hard against my ear it hurt. Nothing, just a crackle of static like a dead radio station. Come on, I muttered, slamming the receiver down and immediately picking it up again. I redialed slower this time, making sure each number clicked into place. Same thing. A loud hissing static filled my ear. This is a hospital. How can the phones not work? I glanced out the window, which overlooked a small courtyard. A man was standing out there, smoking a cigarette. It was David, one of the other nurses. A nice guy, I thought. He'd helped me find the supply closet earlier. He wasn't looking around or enjoying the night air. He was staring straight up at the break room window. Straight at me. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just watched. As I stared back at him, I hung up the phone. The second the receiver hit the cradle, the static in the room stopped. My head whipped back to the phone. I lifted the receiver again. The static was back, instant and loud. I put it down. Silence. It wasn't the line that was dead. It was like something was actively jamming it the moment I tried to use it. He knew, Anderson knew, and he wasn't going to let me call for help. My attempt to rationalize everything crumbled into dust. This was real. Eleanor was gone, Mr. Miller was gone, and that thing, that hive, was watching me through the eyes of a man I'd shared a coffee with just that morning. Forget the phone. I needed proof, something tangible, something I could show the police. Eleanor's file. Anderson must have written something down about the procedure he performed. The records archive was in the basement, a cold, damp place that smelled of old paper and disinfectant. The door was supposed to be locked, accessible only with a staff keycard. But when I got there, it was already slightly ajar, a dark sliver in the dim hallway, a welcoming invitation, a trap. I knew it was a trap, but what choice did I have? I pushed the door open. The motion sensor lights flickered on, buzzing loudly in the quiet. Rows of tall metal shelves stretched into the gloom. I found the E section, my sneakers silent on the concrete floor. My breath puffed out in small white clouds. Miller, Eleanor, Evans. I pulled out the drawer for her last name. My fingers traced across the tabs until I found it. Eleanor Vance. The folder was empty. Not just the documents, the whole manila folder was gone. Just a vacant space where it should have been. A cold dread washed over me. They knew I'd come here. They were one step ahead of me. I looked up at the top of the filing cabinet. It was covered in a fine layer of dust, except for one perfectly clean rectangle, the exact size and shape of a patient file. It had been moved, recently. Behind me, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The lights went out. Plunged into total darkness. My scream died in my throat, choked off by pure shock. I scrambled backwards, tripping over my own feet and crashing against a shelf. Files rained down around me. I was trapped. And then the hum started again, louder than ever before. It wasn't just a sound in my ears, it was a physical pressure. It was inside the walls, in the air, in my bones. It felt like a low-voltage current was running through the room, making my hair stand on end. Then came the voice. It wasn't through my ears, it was inside my skull, as clear as my own thoughts. It was Dr. Anderson's voice, calm, patient, patronizing. Curiosity is a symptom of a disordered mind, Nurse Jenkins. I clapped my hands over my ears, a useless gesture. The voice was already inside. I squeezed my eyes shut. The chaos in your thoughts is disruptive. It affects the harmony of the environment. You feel it, don't you? The agitation, the fear. These are chemical imbalances, easily corrected. "Get out of my head!" I shrieked into the darkness, my voice raw. There is no need for alarm. Just relax. We are coming to help you find your balance again.
The lock on the door clicked. Light flooded in, blinding me. 3 figures stood silhouetted in the doorway. It was David, the nurse from the courtyard, and 2 security guards I didn't recognize. Their faces were all the same, smooth, calm, unblinking. There was no anger, no concern, nothing. The horrible truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just the patients, it was the staff too. All of them. There were no allies here, no one to help me. The entire hospital was one single being, and I was a virus it was getting ready to purge. I wasn't in a building full of people. I was inside the belly of a monster. I didn't fight. My body went limp with despair. What was the point? They could hear my thoughts. They knew every move I was going to make before I did. David stepped forward. "You had a fall, Nurse Jenkins," he said, his voice as flat and metallic as Eleanor's had been. "Dr. Anderson wants to check you for a concussion." They lifted me to my feet, one on each arm. Their grips were firm but not violent, like orderlies handling a compliant patient. They led me out of the basement, up the stairs, and down the main corridor.
My mind was racing, trying to find a way out, an escape, but it was like running in a dream. Every door was an exit to another part of the trap. They weren't taking me to an examination room. They were walking towards the surgical wing, towards the operating theater, towards Anderson's table. We passed a large decorative mirror hanging on the wall of the corridor. For a split second, I glanced at our reflection. Me, held between these 2 blank-faced guards, David walking calmly behind. And my blood ran cold. For an instant, a single, impossible instant, my reflection in the mirror lagged behind my real self. As my real head was turned forward, staring down the hall in terror, my reflection's head was turned towards me. And it was smiling. A placid, empty smile. The exact same smile I had seen on Eleanor's face. Then, in the blink of an eye, it snapped back into place, perfectly mimicking my horrified expression. The hum in my head grew stronger, warmer, almost welcoming. The network wasn't just trying to catch me anymore. It was already inside, pulling at the seams of my reality, showing me the person I was about to become. They weren't hurting me. Their hands were just there, guiding me. 2 guards, 1 on each arm, with David walking a few paces behind. Every step was perfectly in sync. Left foot, right foot, a quiet, rhythmic march towards the surgical wing. My mind was a blank wall of static. What could I do? They knew what I was thinking. They'd proven that. Any plan I made would be like shouting my strategy to the enemy before the battle even started. The operating theater, Anderson's table, that was it, the end of the line. Then a flicker of something. A memory of my training instructor, years ago, yelling at us. "Machines are perfect," he'd said. "People are messy. Your advantage is that you can be messy." Messy. My legs suddenly buckled beneath me. It wasn't a real fall, just a clumsy, theatrical stumble. I let my knees hit the linoleum with a sharp crack. And everything stopped. Instantly. The 2 guards holding me, David behind us, all 3 froze in place, a perfect, synchronized tableau. They didn't try to help me up. They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't shove me forward. They just waited. Their heads were cocked at the exact same slight angle, their unblinking eyes fixed on me, the obstacle, the error in the code. My heart gave a painful lurch. They weren't people anymore. They were a program, and I had just fed it an unexpected command. They don't improvise. They execute. That was their weakness, a tiny crack in their perfect wall. I slowly got back to my feet, my mind racing for the first time since they'd grabbed me. I had to be messy. I had to be unpredictable. We continued our march. The doors to the surgical wing were just ahead.
To the left was a side corridor leading to the labs and chemical storage. I needed a weapon. I needed a distraction. I needed fire. The thought was like a lightning strike in my brain. Burn it all down. The hum in my head instantly intensified, like a dial being cranked to maximum. The pressure was immense. Then Anderson's voice flooded my mind, no longer patronizing, but cold as ice. Self-destructive behavior is inefficient, Nurse Jenkins. At the same moment, David moved. He stepped forward smoothly, his pace unbroken, and produced a syringe from his pocket. It was filled with a clear liquid. He held it out, not as a threat, but as a simple, logical solution. Shit, he can hear me. He can hear everything. I can't plan. I can't even think about a plan. They were turning me towards the surgical wing's double doors. It was now or never. So, I stopped thinking. I let my body take over, driven by pure animal panic. I didn't think about fire. I didn't think about escape. I just moved. Instead of heading for the chemical room, I screamed, a raw, wordless sound, and threw my entire body weight sideways. I wrenched my arm from one guard's grip and lunged for the opposite wall, where a heavy, green oxygen tank was chained to a dolly. My fingers closed around the cold metal valve. The guards were already turning, their movements perfectly coordinated to intercept me, but they were a half-second too slow. Their logic couldn't account for pure random chaos. I didn't try to use the tank as a weapon against